the big board of the most annoying people you encounter every year during the tournament. That takes us to the jerk-off the picks based on
mascot.
We joke and say it's women, but there's always some jerk off the bar who has done this and wants to tell you about it. Oh, really? Right. It's so interesting about, I don't know, how the Blue Jays would use their quickness and speed to outfight a duck. Like, who cares? Please explain to me how the Blue Devil would use his magic powers to overcome a guy with a gun. Tell me about how in the 17th century they used to actually fight bears versus tigers, and bears always won. Who the hell cares? If you don't like college basketball, just don't participate. Don't annoy the hell out of the rest of us who actually like this sport, and this is a big event for us.
Oh my God,
I don't care about your analysis of mascot fights. Congratulations on your totally system you have created. That was actually the storyline for a What's Happening episode in 1977. I'm not even joking. There was a What's Happening where Rerun was picking games based on mascots.
No. Oh, my God.
Really? If this is how you're doing it, that's fine. Just don't tell me about it.
The time. Wake up with Defo, joined by Lubie. Welcome to the Defo Show.
All part of our campaign that is further proof, further evidence why the cleaning lady always wins. Good morning, everybody. Peel yourself off the mat Monday. Great to be with you, Jeff DeForest. We got a very handsome and dapper-looking Mike Lubitz. Lubie coming off a big weekend and couldn't have asked for much more. I saw somebody on Facebook crying and lamenting the fact that, whoa, what are we going to do now? Football's over. It's like, get over it.
It's been over.
NFL always manages to steal headlines anyway, right? I mean, they were very much in the news. Josh Allen. How much money are they making in this league that they can afford to pay every quarterback $50, $60 million a year now? It's amazing. It's one thing in the NBA, you know, they're taking massive amounts of money internationally, marketing and television rights and all of this other stuff, whatever they're making money on besides ticket sales, which is that true, Lubie? Do you believe that to be a truth? It was always implied, and this was an old theory, goes back more than 50 years since I've been following sports, that ticket sales are the most minor part of an organization's income in professional sports, and I guess college sports as well. Is that a fact? It would have to be, wouldn't it? Because you couldn't keep generating these kind of voluminous contracts here where guys are making 50, 60 million. Myles Garrett wanted out of Cleveland, didn't he? Myles Garrett, he said that was it. I can't stand this place. The city is a bleeping dump. Wants out, wants nothing to do with the organization. They've been subpar for a long time. They buried themselves with the Deshaun Watson deal, still paying this guy $230 some odd million guaranteed, even though he doesn't play. And when he does play, Lubie, unfortunately for him, well, I mean, for him, he's fine, but he's not very good, is he? It's kind of crazy.
Nope.
It'd be like, I don't want to get into this with LeBron James. You think he would shove me if he saw me at a Heat game, if I said that, I mean, the Deshaun Watson, Bronny James would be more effective as a starting point guard than Deshaun Watson has been, more impactful than Deshaun Watson has been as the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. It's been an outright disaster.
Yep.
Garrett, and you always have to love this because you can take everybody at face value, can you not, Lubie? In sports, when they make a statement, guy says, hey, it's not about the money, man. I just want out of here. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as soon as somebody drops a massive amount of cash, unprecedented, highest paid guy in history that isn't a quarterback, Myles Garrett says, you know what? I love this place, man. I mean, I don't know how it happens, but they always manage to steal the headlines. Geno Smith traded to the Las Vegas Raiders from the Seattle Seahawks, who you would have to think, wow, I mean, what is the Seahawks game plan? Just a tankometer trying to get a quarterback next year? Is that where they're coming from? Right. So that stole a lot of the headlines, in spite of the fact that, what a holiday for me, Lubie. Big Daddy is in.
Oh, Lipscomb. Oh, God. Okay.
I told you Lipscomb was a team to watch, did I not? I had no idea that they were a team to watch. I mean, I glanced at the standings. I think they were tied for the conference regular season title with North Alabama, who they knocked off in the championship round of their tournament. So Lipscomb is in. Big Daddy is in. And that's from the Atlantic Sun Conference. Now, I am fascinated by the weenie teams that clinch the automatic bid, Louis. I don't know. How do you feel about that after all of these years? Have you entered into this debate at all? I like it. I personally love it. And then we've seen any number of examples, and this is what you have to look at if you're getting into the tournament, which cranks up in a little over a week, about a week and a half away. And of course, the conference tournaments in the major conferences really take shape this week. A lot at stake there in terms of seeding and who you think is going to have a shot. I don't know. Did you watch 60 Minutes by any chance last night, Lubie?
No.
You did not? Okay.
No.
Well, great stuff all the way across on a variety of things. But the lighthearted feature, what was on what a nutbag Danny Hurley is at the University of Connecticut. Guy's a nut. I mean, he's legitimately crazy, Lubie. You know, he walks around the court with like incense before each game,
Oh my God.
and he hides like garlic underneath the stands.
Oh Jesus.
This guy's out of his mind. Is he accomplished as a college basketball coach? Yes, back-to-back championships at the University of Connecticut. Everybody's gunning for it. What was interesting, though, that he said, and I'm sure we'll get into this on Tuesday. You guys might want to tune in, and hopefully this will come off without a hitch. But Jim Larrañaga, the former University of Miami coach, of course, George Mason, other places that he was at along the ride, took two Cinderellas to Final Four. So I don't know that you can get much more insight into the tournament than will be provided for us by Jim Larrañaga in terms of the psyche and the psychology of it and all the different things that you have to do and what it's like to be a Cinderella and how tough it is and seedings and all of that stuff. But we know this, Lubie, from previous interviews with Jim Larrañaga, and that'll be Tuesday at 4 right here on Bleacher Brothers, where I couldn't be any more excited. Have you gotten to the point, Lubie, where you became jaded about the business? I still look forward to talking to certain people on these shows. I really do. I've been doing this 50 years. I said this to Larrañaga when he consented to do the interview, which I believe will be his first interview of any length that he's done. Have you seen anything with Jim Larrañaga since he left?
No.
A lot of these coaches like to lay low. I know we tried to contact Tom Herman when he left FAU, and he was an accomplished coach, coached at the highest of levels there, was getting paid a monster sum of money to coach at Texas, and didn't want to say anything about this. I don't think he's surfaced since, has he?
No.
I haven't seen him. So, Larrañaga, I don't think he's really done anything of any extensive nature in terms of interviews. Now, I don't know that he wants to talk about the situation at the University of Miami at any great length. What do you think, Lubie?
Mm-hmm.
You have to at least ask him about it. Hey, what the hell happened? But we know part of what happened.
He'll talk.
Seeds were planted a couple of years ago, and Hurley kind of alluded to this. Hurley's talking about his UConn team, which you would have to say, what, a disappointment this year?
Yes.
Can you knock them after they won 2 straight championships if they had a little bit of a drop-off in an extremely competitive and a totally different landscape in college basketball? I don't think so. I mean, you would have to give them a free pass even if they were sub 500, wouldn't you? What do you think, Lubie?
Yeah, I mean, look, it makes sense that they would fall back a little bit. Look, they should still be a tournament team, so they fell back farther than they should have, but can you win back-to-back titles? I mean, there's some room there, obviously.
Especially the way that we judge athletes based on titles and coaches based on championships. You win back-to-back in probably, I mean, how much more competitive can it get? Well, when every team has a possibility of at least doing something, maybe 20 deep. And then on top of that, you can flip a team around with one player.
Yep.
But he said, and this was kind of startling, and you're coaching a team. Think about this dynamic right now, and it applies to Jim Larrañaga because he warned us about this. He said that this whole transfer portal thing and the NIL was going to completely reshape everything that we ever thought about college sports. And the NCAA has its greedy self to blame. They should be on American Greed, should they not? That series, it's on like CNBC, where, I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that they just completely ignored this, it's almost like concussions and the concussion issue in the NFL, where it was just completely whitewashed. Like, oh, what are you talking about? If we pay these kids, it'll ruin everything.
Okay.
So now what do you have? 50%. He said half the players on his roster, Danny Hurley, talking about the UConn team, which is not having a great season by any standard of measurement for UConn, going all the way back to Jimmy Calhoun and some of the great teams they had in the early 90s. But half the team is considering leaving.
Oh, Jesus.
And he's aware of that. Some of these guys that are on his roster already know where they're going next year.
No, let me see.
They've already talked about the money, and they know what their NIL deal is going to be, and they haven't even entered the transfer portal yet. And they already know the hell, they're out of there. So that's got to be a tough way to operate. We'll get into that with Jim Larinaga because I'm thinking he probably, just saw this. I heard a small piece of inside information. I don't know if I even want to bring it up to him about a player walking into his office and saying that even though he had been relatively useless to the team and had been plagued with injuries, he was willing to come back for another year for half the money.
No,
And this is a guy that wasn't even, doing anything. And
Yeah.
you're thinking, imagine being a coach that you're sitting there going, the audacity of this kid. He's going to come back like it was John Blutarski for his 7th season for half the money, even though he was essentially a non-entity for the team this past year. And you're just looking at that across the desk at this guy and saying, what the hell am I doing here? It's time to go. But so the weenie teams, Lubie, did you see anything there that would be of any significance? You have Big Daddy's in. I don't know if they're going anywhere, if they're going to beat anybody. High Point wins the Big South. Drake is in. I think Drake is a repeat performer. Coming back, I believe they've made consecutive tournaments now. Is that possible? Out of the Missouri Valley Conference. Southern Illinois, Edwardsville is in, out of the Ohio Valley. I'm not according them too much of a shot to win the whole tournament there. Omaha gets in by my favorite circumstance, disqualification. How about that?
Right.
Omaha is in the, what is it, the Summit Conference? And they get in by DQ because the team that won the conference championship is ineligible because they're transitioning.
They're new.
That's not a word that you really want to throw out there too often without getting into major ugly debates, right versus left versus right. And so the team is in that transition period where you're moving into Division I, but you're not eligible yet for the tournament. They win the championship, so Omaha gets in. And that'll make Warren Buffett very happy about that. He's a big Omaha guy. St. Thomas was the team that was ineligible. St. Thomas. That's not St. Thomas Aquinas. So small-time qualifiers getting in, always exciting. You see what it means to these young men, kids, as the coaches always refer to them. They don't refer to them as kids anymore, do they? Hey, you know what? The kids really got a thrill out of that.
Oh, they're making millions. It's hard to call them kids.
Are there players making more money than coaches? I don't think the program would have that kind of imbalance. So would they? But
it happens.
Some superstar comes out. Is Cooper Flagg making more than John Shire? Is that even remotely possible, Lubie?
Probably. Cooper Flagg is. I would have no doubts. I mean, the dude's going to be the number 1 pick.
All right. We're going to talk a lot of baskets with Grant Long. He's going to join us about 8:30. We love Grant. A nice job digging him up because we haven't been able to find him. You say that you made 50 inquiries that were received with no response from Grant Long, who is always a very, very generous person with his time here on the show. We love Grant Long, original member of the Miami Heat, 15-year NBA career. Yep. Eastern Michigan as a collegian, has all kinds of great stories and insight. Currently on the Detroit Pistons broadcast team. And I would imagine this, Lubie, that Grant Long will use this platform to campaign for me to cash that bet at 9-1. Although it's getting more and more difficult. The Pistons still remain a great story in the NBA. Complete turnaround from their 14-68 of a year ago under Monty Williams, the former coach of the year. And this year, well over 500, the Detroit Pistons. Cade Cunningham has emerged as, you would have to say, what?
No,
a second-tier star. And that's not a knock to say a second-tier star because your top-tier stars are Doncic and LeBron and KD and all of these elite players. But being in that second tier is not too bad, is it? Especially if you're an emerging player, which Cade Cunningham is. And think about this. He's been part of orchestrating this remarkable turnaround with J.B. Bickerstaff, their coach. How is he not the coach of the year? They won 8 of their last 11. And now Kenny Atkinson, at the same time with the Cleveland Cavaliers, they have to be just mind-blowing in terms of what you would have thought about them before the season, Lubie, versus what they're actually accomplishing right now. Now, they may not win it all. There's still a big fat price to win the NBA championship. And I find that I mean, would that be the proverbial chip on your shoulder, the provider there? Because I mean, how are you totally ignored as a championship possibility when you've been hammering people and now we're on a 14-game winning streak? They're winning these games by double digits. They've won any number of games, an enormous number of games by 30 plus, like 5 or 6 different games during the course of the season by 30 plus. They're blowing people out and getting no consideration. Their coach of the year our coach is going to run second, and the coach of the year. Oh well, no, Atkinson's going to win it, but yeah, how do you can you deny him that at minus 700, Libby?
No, I mean, look, they were around a 4 or 5 seed and hovered around the top 3 all last year. So usually that team isn't a shocker to be the number 1 seed. But the fact that they may go pretty much wire to wire as number 1 seed when you had the Celtics defending champion returning most of their roster is impressive. So and he's a new coach, his first year, so he took them to the next level. Blah blah.
Everybody
blah.
likes the guy too. Oh, they like Bickerstaff also, I would imagine, right?
The Pistons one to me is just more impressive because the Pistons have been mired in not mediocrity, mired in just suck.
They've been awful
for like a decade, like ever since. Yes, we know in the early 2000s they were as consistent as anyone in the league, but from that point on, since 2000, I mean, it's been like 10 to 15 years of just being horrendous.
It's the curse of Darko. Never draft a player with a Marx Brothers name. They did it. Joe Dumars, one of the great executives in NBA history, but forever, it's like his Jackie Smith moment when he panicked. Even though the guy played in the league for over 10 years, Darko Milicic. Does he have a son that's playing college basketball? Milicic Jr.? Is that possibly Darko's kid?
I mean, it would be. I mean, he was drafted in the early 2000s. It would make sense.
All right, because I thought I saw it. I can't remember which team he was playing for, but there was like Milicic Jr., and I'm thinking, don't take him, Joe. Don't take him, no matter how good he looks.
I mean, they've sucked. Like, they've been really bad. Like, had record losing streaks as recent as last year to then not only be a top 6 seed, but they're taking on the best teams in the league. Like, that to me is just a story that there's, and it's his first year too. Like, there's just a lot there where Atkinson winning, it's fine, but the Bickerstaff thing is nuts to me. Like, it's just
Atkinson is no imagination there. I mean, look, it's the best team in the league, and they've been great all year. Can't deny that he's deserving, but to turn a team around like that, I mean, you're literally digging out of a pile of dog poop.
Yep.
And out of nowhere too. It wasn't like there were any remarkable changes. The only change was the head coach.
Yep.
Of any great significance as far as I could see. We'll get into that with Grant Long when he joins us here in just a few minutes on the show. So that's going to be a lot of fun. A bunch of other things. And speaking of the NBA, I don't know, did you want to get into this at all, this whole Stephen A. Smith LeBron thing? Because it's interesting from a few different angles.
Yeah.
Do you believe this, Lubie, that if you're doing a talk show, and this was something back when being very sarcastic, and I don't know that you're being disparaging. I mean, look, it's in the name of humor, a lot of this stuff, is it not, Louis? And is anything that any sportscaster says of such great weight and significance, no matter how prominent of a position or how big of a platform that sportscaster has? You can't have much bigger of a platform than Stephen A. Smith. You could question why he has that big of a platform, but we all know why, right? Because he's willing to make a fool of himself. And he does it with the approach that he's not making a fool of himself. We've seen him, and I've met Stephen A. Smith a couple of times. Now, I don't know if he's changed over the years. His success has spiraled exponentially. Just signed a $100 million contract, has like an amazing mansion somewhere in New Jersey where he lives, and is doing just fine for himself. This was a guy who was a newspaper reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer for many years. I think it was the Inquirer. Are there other papers in Philadelphia that he might have been a reporter for? But whatever. I mean, that was a long time ago. And then remember when he had that Quite Frankly show, which was a bomb, even though he was getting like monster guests on there. He's getting Allen Iverson to hang out with him. Although Iverson, I think, was on some kind of drug at the time. And you're looking at the show and going, this is a piece of garbage. Show gets canceled. He becomes the number one guy, just screaming like a maniac at virtually anything. And did we carry on excessively? Look, we all saw what happened there with Bronny James. He plays 5 games for USC. Wasn't a guy that you would draft in the second round. You might have signed him to some contingent G League contract, contingent on the fact that he doesn't end up playing in Istanbul. And you hope that a guy like that develops. If he wasn't Bronny James, if he was Bronny Jones, and we had no idea who his father was. would you have thought, well, geez, that would be a nice story if the guy evolved into being an NBA player after going like a vagabond around the world? Well, we love that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the Udonis Haslem story, where UD is what? He's an overweight guy playing in France somewhere, and he comes back. Pat Riley puts him on one of these bizarre regimens, like he's done with other players, and he all of a sudden is looking like the second coming of Jack LaLanne, ripped, abs, all kinds of musculature, and becomes an excellent player.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great story, isn't it? And has a
Yes.
long term. How many years did he play in the NBA? 25, 30? He was on the roster forever because
I think
they
like
couldn't
17
find a
years.
spot on the coaching, chairs behind Spoelstra, which is another interesting thing that's happened because all of a sudden Spoelstra now blowing these 15-point leads every night. You're asking yourself, is it A, that it's amazing that he has the team in the game and in that position early on? Is that coaching genius? Or B, does he just flat out blow it every night because he's making poor decisions? What do you think?
I didn't see the Bulls game. I didn't realize they had a big lead again and lost. That is annoying. I assumed they would just win that game easily. So when I looked back and saw that they lost, I was sort of
They're
defeated.
bordering on irrelevant, though, even
Yeah,
though
they
they're
won't matter now. I mean, you can look. They got Wiggins back. They got Ware back. They played a Bulls team that has nothing to play for. Who's already lost Levine. Gotten rid of Levine. Like that's a game you win. You win going away. So to lose it, however they lost it, that season. I don't know what you can put stuff on Spoelstra if you want. I think this roster is just a mess, and it's just a mishmash of things that don't. I think they have a lot of talent, and I think if they had a legit number one, this roster would be perfect. But without a legit number one, this roster is weird. Like there's no like Tyler Hero early on was the leader guy, but that's not Hero. He's like your third or fourth best guy. He's not your number one. So
yeah.
The roster's just weird. And I think Spoelstra doing the best he can. The losing of the leads, they probably get ahead in games they shouldn't be. And he is trying to just run out the clock. Like he's probably trying to do everything he can to just get out of there with a win. And there's only so much you can do. I mean, this roster is that's the funny thing. It's not a bad roster. They just don't have a number one talent, and all the other teams ahead of them do. Like even the Hawks with their issues, Trae Young's a number one guy. Like he's a little bit of a head case, but he's the number one guy. Like all the teams around them have number one type players. They're the only one that doesn't. They have more talent than a lot of these rosters, but they don't have that one player. Look, again, the Pistons. What were the Pistons before Cunningham? Cunningham's been healthy for 2 years. They have a coach that's learned how to accentuate his game. Now they're a top 6 seed, and they're a team you don't want to play. Like, yeah, they're not the 3 or 4 like the Knicks or the Bucks, but if the Knicks or Bucks had to play them in the first round, that would suck. Like, to get to the 3 or 4 seed and then have to play that Pistons team in the first round, like, I wouldn't want to deal with that. So, like, the Heat don't have that. Like, that guy is integral in the NBA. That guy can look at the Mavs. I mean, that guy can get you to a conference finals and an NBA finals.
I'm laughing because I know you love the officiating in the NBA, Lubie, and how ridiculous some of these things are. By the way, traveling, if they eliminated traveling in women's college basketball, all games would end in a double shutout. Amazing. I don't want to be disparaging about it because it sounds like I'm always dumping on women's college basketball, but I tried to watch the last 5 minutes of UCLA USC for the Big Ten championship. It was the 1 seed versus the 2, and 2 teams that have been circulating water. They both in the top 5 nationally. USC with Juju Watkins certainly has been a factor all year, 2 or 3 in the country. And UCLA, weren't they number 1 at one point in women's college basketball? This wasn't even basketball, Lubie. And literally, without traveling, there would have been no chance of either team scoring. That being said, I'm watching your man, Giannis Antetokounmpo, the future savior of the Miami Heat.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, this guy just literally barrels over people.
No.
It's not even Shaq. They used to call stuff on Shaq once in a while when he would knock 3 people down like he was David Benavidez in a light heavyweight fight. You're just firing punches right and left. But he knocks 2 guys down on his way to the basket. Travels, takes about 6 steps, changing pivot feet multiple times, and dunks the ball against the Cavaliers yesterday, and then goes to the line as a result. So what are you guys looking at? My God. Speaking of replays, while I did want to get into this just for a second here, this whole – so where does it stand? There was a kind of a credo when people first started becoming overly and openly disparaging and sarcastic about things that were going on in sports. You win, you're great. You lose, you stink. It's that kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
And so Bronny James, all right, we all know what happened there. The guy that got drafted only because of his father. We know this. Otherwise, I don't know. The Lakers even sign him to an undrafted free agent deal? Probably not. Should LeBron be accorded that kind of gratuity by a franchise that he has carried to a championship and is still, completely making them relevant, even though he's now injured? And we'll see what happens in the last couple of weeks. He got him up to number 2 in the Western Conference, in spite of the fact they went through a major transition. And it didn't really have the goods, not much behind Anthony Davis and LeBron originally. And now it's not like they have a roster of all-stars surrounding and great grizzled veterans that know exactly what their role should be surrounding Luka and LeBron. So if they did him a favor, can you really begrudge him that? I don't know. But as a sports host, a commentator, should you go by this rule that you would never say anything on the air that you wouldn't say to a person's face? Is that a fair way to approach this business, Lubie? What do you think? Would you say that you should never say anything publicly that you wouldn't have the balls to stand right up in front of, say, in this case, LeBron James, and say, you know what, your son stinks, and the fact that he's on the roster is a disgrace, and you've robbed some, like it was that deal where they got the scholarships, all of those famous actresses and actors.
Yeah, paid for the kids to do things.
Right. So some poor girl that was 3 years old when she got into soccer and maybe was a borderline Division I type of player, but might have gotten that last scholarship to USC. Instead, somebody that was on Little House of the Prairie is sending their daughter there because they got a bogus scholarship, even though they don't even know that the shape of the ball is round. Are you depriving some deserving person of that spot? Maybe so. I don't know. Is it that much of a big deal in the NBA when you're the number 53 pick? Maybe not. But should you take that approach that you wouldn't say anything publicly that you wouldn't say to a person's face?
It's not the worst idea, but I mean, that's not how life works. Like, how often do you just walk up to people randomly and criticize them or their children? So I don't know about that. I mean, in this job, you're going to, when you talk
this
about
job calls for you to do this sort of thing.
Talk about things for a living. You're going to ruffle feathers. I don't think you should get personal. Like our friend Mike Mayo talks about ad hominem. Like, I don't think you should talk about who they are as human beings unless you know them. But it's not LeBron's kid. He's a guy that was drafted into the NBA. They used a second-round pick, which we've seen second-round picks work. Like, for all the time, second-round picks are useless. Jokic was a second-round pick. Like, plenty of teams. The Spurs have used plenty of second-round picks into becoming all-stars. Like, a second-round pick isn't just an automatic throwaway, okay? So they used second-round pick on the kid, and it was a dumb move, and he is horrendous.
And they put him on the roster.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry. Like, LeBron can't handle that. Like, grow up. Like, what do you thrust your kid forward in a place he wasn't ready for and wasn't prepared for. Then when he's not playing well, this isn't a college kid, okay? And even college kids nowadays deserve criticism because they're getting paid. But this is a pro. This is a dude that's getting paid to travel. He's back and forth. The whole story is ridiculous. I've never heard of this.
Well, millions of dollars, too.
He's with this team, but then he's on the G League, but then he's on this team, and then he's on the G League. It's like, dude, we all know it's because of you. So just grow. Like, you're being a child by walking up to another man. And I didn't hear what was said. I'm sure Stephen A's talked about it, but
it didn't sound particularly flattering.
It was just stupid. I'm sorry. Stephen A bothers me, and he gets on my nerves. But don't have your kid play basketball then. Like, he's
well, and if you think a guy that's in the media is a clown, then why would you take what he was saying seriously? All right. So we have a guy that is well established. I did want to mention real quickly before we get into it with Grant Long here on the NBA and other basketball issues, the tournament. Of course, Grant would have an interest in that as well. But the New York State Athletic Commission, a disgrace, Lubie, they reviewed his fight where the referee clearly blew the call, and there should have been an automatic disqualification by any rule that I've ever seen anywhere universally. I don't care if you're fighting in Saudi Arabia, somewhere in a Turkish bath in Istanbul, at the Olympic Auditorium, Madison Square Garden. The rule is very plainly stated that if a guy from the corner jumps up on the ring apron,
that's it
during the course of a round. That's never mind the non-knockdown call, which was also a farce. But As soon as that corner man jumps
That's it.
up there, fight's over.
Yep.
It's not allowed. I mean, it's an automatic DQ.
Yeah.
And that happened, and the New York State Athletic Commission, in its infinite wisdom and fairness, decided to side with the star and the guy who's making all of the money, and they let the results stand, saying that, well, we don't know what would have happened had the guy ruled it correctly.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it would have changed the whole fight. It was an automatic DQ. It was unbelievable.
That's one of those where because you'll do well if they like people like me will be like, well, they called the foul. That you're like, but you'll always say, yeah, but you don't know what could have happened, and you're not wrong. Even with 2 minutes left, that's 2 minutes in any game. Fine. If this thing led to a definitive DQ at that moment, it doesn't matter what would happen.
All over. Yes.
That's simple. Like you can rule on that. Like that's
it's the same. That guy climbing up there is the same as throwing in the towel, my friend. Which actually,
it's
throwing in the towel doesn't automatically disqualify the guy, but the guy jumping up on a ring apron does. All right, Grant Long going to join us here. Should we go to Grant right away? He's been standing by here. Let's do that, and then we'll bring you our important messages a little later on. So,
okay.
Oh wow, he's doing video.
This
is great. Wow. You look like you haven't aged since that 88, 89 Heat roster came out, Grant Long. How are you, my friend? You look great.
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you. I'm one of those second-round picks that I guess all the experts wrong.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that. Look, you probably heard a lot of things during your time there, even from Heat fans in that first year when they were rather sympathetic to what was going on. And you couldn't help it that Ronnie Cycling was the black hole, the Bermuda Triangle of offense. So what are you going to do? I mean, where do you draw the line on something like that, Grant? You're in the media now. Do you subscribe to that theory? Because I would have to say I've said things that I probably wouldn't want to say to a guy's face, even though I usually am not mean-spirited in what I'm talking about. But we probably said some unflattering things about players or coaches over the years. How do you feel about that? What did you think about that whole incident?
Well, let me say this first of all, guys. What we're hearing from the athletes nowadays, they've always wanted to say these things, but they didn't have a voice or didn't have a medium to actually get their opinions out there. They've always felt this way. Why did this guy on TV say this about me? Why did this guy write this about me? A lot of times you heard the athletes maybe going to a writer when they saw an article back, and they would say something or question that. I know Ronnie used to do that quite a bit. Hey, why did you write I didn't play? Or why didn't you write why did you write I did not play well? But now that players or athletes have a platform to now get it out there and say, hey, you were wrong for saying what you said. Now you're hearing all of these things come out. I agree with Lubie in the sense that as an athlete, you are fair game. Once you sign up, particularly and I tell kids this all the time, the difference between college and you hear a lot of people say, well, it's the first year pro guy. Yeah, you know what? If you wanted those excuses, you should have stayed in college. But now you're in the pros. This is a business. And you open yourself up to all of these things when you say that you are going to skip the college stuff and become a professional. And I think that's where we are. Now, when you start making it personal, I'm against that totally. But if you're talking about a guy that's not playing well, or in your opinion, you've seen 5 or 6 games where he hasn't performed as advertised, it's your right to give your perspective and say, this guy is not performing. This guy, maybe he's not what we thought he was. Maybe he should go back to college, or maybe he should be in the G League. As a professional opinion, a person that's being paid to give your opinion, I think you're obligated to say those things. And nobody's immune from that, like I said, until you start making it personal, which I don't think Stephen A. did.
I keep envisioning the Jim Rome, Jim Everett confrontation there. When ESPN2 first came into existence, and he was calling Jim Everett Chris Everett all the time on the radio, and Jim Everett's sitting across from him doing an interview, and there are 2 guys at a desk, a very primitive set, Grant, and he goes, I bet you don't have the balls to say this to my face. And so finally he does it, and then Everett just shoves him through the wall of the set, and everything collapses. I was in the locker room, too, with the Dolphins when Gene Atkins, the safety for the Dolphins, body slam, picked up like he was Bruno Sammartino, picked up Jason Cole, who was about I don't know, what, 250 pounds at least. Picked him up, did an airplane spin, and slam dunked him to the ground because he wasn't happy with something. Did you ever confront a guy, Grant? You were too nice of a guy, and nobody had anything bad to say about you. Did you ever confront somebody or feel like doing it? Maybe you had it in your head the next time I see this guy, I'm going to give him the business, but then you passed on it because you're just a good guy. Did that ever happen in your sporting career?
It happened, guys, and it happened to a very high level of discomfort for me because I was a Detroit Piston at the time. Doug Collins was the coach, and there was a writer who wrote who only got one side of the story.
Mm.
He went to Doug Collins, and Doug gave him a bunch of information that wasn't factual, but he never fact checked it with me. He just took what Doug said and he ran with it, and it or painted me in a very, very bad light. And then later, when Doug got fired, that same guy who wrote the story, he came and apologized for it because he said it was a lack of professionalism on his part, that he never came to me and allowed me to say, well, Doug said this, how do you feel? He just, Doug said, and ran with it, which was, I guess back then it was a way to sensationalize things because now you got a head coach running down one of his players. However, what he didn't understand was I was one of those players that the things that he was saying about me, everybody who knew me knew that could not be true. So it backfired on his part. And later on, he came and he apologized for it. I don't know how well I received that apology because
at least he try to make some amends, So
it really put me in a bad light with a lot of people that the people that knew me stood up for me, but the people that didn't know me, that put me in a bad light. So I didn't appreciate that part of it.
Who didn't like you? I know Lubie's chomping at the bit to get into some stuff, but I selfishly want to throw one more at you here, Grant Long, before we get going into some real detail. But I did suggest to people that they take a shot for J.B. Bickerstaff to be Coach of the Year. Nobody closer to the situation than you. All right, he takes a team that was 14-68. I don't know what I missed in the offseason. I didn't see the Pistons make a lot of major moves. Seemed like they got tapped again. Elgin Baylor treatment at the draft lottery and ended up with like the 5th pick instead of number 1 overall. Even though they had a worse record, it was a second worst record in franchise history, I think, going all the way back, to the 50s. And I think he should be Coach of the Year. I don't know. I mean, how remarkable is that? Now Kenny Atkinson is a heavy favorite, but what happened there? I mean, what is the storyline there, Grant Long? This is one of the remarkable turnarounds. I don't think it's being talked about enough.
I agree, guys. And I don't think it was a major overhaul because the team, as it was constructed a year ago, is pretty much still intact. But what's been different is Trajan Langdon, a new president, general manager, and J.B. Bickerstaff coming over from Cleveland, which I have no idea why they let him go. You mentioned Coach of the Year with Atkins, but yeah. Cleveland is playing some outstanding basketball. They are amazingly ahead of the field in the Eastern Conference, and hats off to their team because they've made some strides as well. But that team was coached by J.B. Bickerstaff, who is now obviously the Detroit Pistons head coach. So a lot of what we're seeing in their growth, it should be laid at the feet of J.B. Bickerstaff. So when you say he's a candidate for Coach of the Year, in essence, he's done it on 2 teams in 2 years. So yes, you go from a team that won 14 games last year in the Detroit Pistons, lost 28 in a row.
Wow.
And now you're talking about 6th place in the Eastern Conference, not a play-in. We're talking about a playoff spot here for this Detroit Piston team. And I think a lot of it is the culture that's been created by J.B. Bickerstaff and Trajan Langdon. They're on the same page. And they did make a move in bringing in Beasley. They brought in Schroeder at the trade deadline. And one of the things that Trajan Langdon said was he did not want to disrupt what was already here because the guys have a belief in what they're doing that wasn't here last year, even though the personnel is the same. So that's why I have to lay it and give J.B. Bickerstaff a lot of credit because the guys are the same. I don't want to badmouth Monty Williams, the former coach, but it has to be in the guidance of this team that's seeing them have the success that they're having.
Well, and a lot of the time, look down here, we talk about all the time about growth from within. And the Heat have seen it over the years, and we saw it this year with Tyler Hero. But you, for years, were pounding, and it's funny, it hasn't been that long, but it has been a few years. You were pounding the desk for Cade Cunningham, and you said, look, this kid when I see this kid, watch this kid. And then he for the majority of his beginning of his career, he had health concerns, and that he just wasn't on the court. And you would always point to that. Look, he's just not on the court. The last couple of years, he stayed healthy. And not only that, but his games just blossomed. Like, what have you seen from him this year that that's the biggest difference for them is Bickerstaff and Cunningham becoming the real number one for the Detroit Pistons.
And you mentioned it. Cunningham has really come into his own after the injuries. On the other side of those injuries, he's an all-star for the first time. Let me say, and I don't know if it has a whole lot to do with it, but you talk about mindset. He is also a vegetarian now. So it's taken his whole basketball athletic thing to another level, and his commitment to trying to be better. I think for a young player, his leadership is outstanding. He gives confidence to everyone on the team. I'll give you an example that Malik Beasley is one of the best shooters. We didn't know that, but he's one of the best shooters in the NBA now that he's with the Detroit Pistons. Cade Cunningham says he's the best shooter in the world. Well, that may not be true, but Malik Beasley believes that because it's coming from Cade Cunningham. That's the kind of confidence that he gives his teammates. And the last thing I'll say about Cade is that he has become very, very consistent in what he does. He is an assist guy. He can find a balance in a game where he can get his teammates involved, but yet understand when it comes crunch time, he's the guy that can, get you 7, 8, 9 points in a row to take over a game. So I think he has a terrific pulse on each game, and I think that comes with growth, and I think he's been there. I think these guys had 3 coaches in 3 years. So, when you think about that and still see the growth in him, you have to say he's that kind of guy mentally, and he's focused.
I was psychologically damaged, Grant Long, and we thank you so much for being with us. It's great to see you, by the way, too, here on the video stream. But psychologically damaged for many years after doing post-game and play-by-play on Hurricanes basketball when they lost their first 17 Big East games. Really were horrible. Maybe they'd eke one out in overtime against Northern Illinois, but at home. But in general, they were horrible. And I had to do, and Leonard Hamilton was a very serious cat. He's retiring this year from Florida State, and they're about to announce their new head coach. Locks, is that the guy's name? Yeah, a former Florida State player. But that being said, I mean, it was tough to do those post-game shows. And you have been involved with the Pistons broadcast team through this entire era where they have been doormats, veritable NBA punchlines. And it can't be easy because you're a very enthusiastic person. So how different is it this year being able to talk about a winner after a game or when they're surprising virtually everybody as opposed to, essentially – I always felt like with Leonard, I was presiding over a wake at the end of the game. It was hard because, you hey, what did you take away? Any positives? And you're like, we just lost 15 in a row to Forest. So it's got to be a pleasure. I mean, it has to be a pleasure to be able to enjoy your job on all levels this year.
Night and day from last year. You're right. It's like, you're trying to find. There were so many silver linings we found in games last year after 28 losses in a row and only winning 14 games. We'd come on saying, well, the silver lining in this is
we don't have any more games left this year.
Yeah, we silver linings. There were so many of them that we used early on in the season. But here's the thing. It does make the broadcast go so much easier when we're talking about why they won and how they won a basketball game versus how they managed to lose so many times when you have Cade Cunningham, the number 1 pick. You've got the number 8 pick. At one point, we had 4 or 5 number 1 picks on the roster.
Yeah.
And we were losing basketball games. It's hard to explain to fans because they get caught up in a number 1 pick should be great. And all number 1 picks aren't great, but you can't tell a fan that. So you've got to find a way, I like to say, to make that chicken stew over and over again and serve it like it's brand new every game. That's tough to do when you're losing, but it's easy to do when you're winning because you have so much to celebrate, so many things to talk about that are positive when they're winning. And that just wasn't the case last year.
We know during your collegiate playing days, you were very enthusiastic about college basketball and no doubt keep an eye on it still. What's your feeling? I mean, how would you characterize this time of the year? I'm thrilled right now, Grant Long, because Big Daddy is in the tournament, Lipscomb. qualified with their conference championship, and I always like to take a little taste on Lipscomb to win it all, just in case something bizarre happens. But how do you perceive the tournament? What are your thoughts and feelings about what's about to transpire here? And of course, a lot at stake in these conference tournaments coming up this week.
Yeah, it is, and it's a great time for college basketball. We're getting ready to go into the tournaments, and everybody's excited. Everybody's talking about their bracket and all of those things. So this is a fun time for college basketball. And I think for me, the best thing about it is that all of the alumni across the country are hoping that it's going to be their team that makes a deep run in the tournament. So you see that happening. Guys get galvanized. Old teammates get together and talk about how it was when they were playing on that team or with that university. So it's a very good time. But at the same time, the portal has been, and I don't want to say if it's been bad. I don't know if it's been good. It's been a neutral spot because so many guys are changing destinations now. I heard Jim Larrañaga say this a few weeks ago about how shocked he was, and I think he said he was going to retire, if I'm not wrong.
He did.
Yeah, he's retired.
He takes a team to the Sweet 16 or the Final Four or something.
2 years
Final
ago.
Four 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
He gets like 6 or 7 guys who call and say, "Hey, we're leaving."
Yep.
Yeah. Danny Hurley was on 60 Minutes last night, Grant, and he said half of his roster is considering leaving, is either already gone or considering leaving.
Who said that, Defo?
Danny Hurley, coach of UConn.
Wow,
Back defending champions.
So he's coaching a team where, I mean, it's one thing you got a guy who's the 11th man, he's sulking on the bench there, and he says, you know what, I'm going to sit out a year and transfer to Pittsburgh. But, when you're a competitive team, 2-time defending world champion, and half the guys on your roster, some of whom may have already struck deals, are ready to go. I mean, it's hard to sit there and give them the old rah-rah pep talk like Pitino did at halftime.
It really is, and it's as a former college athlete myself, I get it. I understand. Just like in the pros, the guys are moving from team to team because it's a business. They understand that. Now, college players are having the opportunity to do, in essence, what college coaches have done for years, and that is take advantage or leverage your success that you're having. When coaches win, they're able to get new contracts, whether it's with their current team or they get offered from another college team, and they take off, they bolt. Now, the players now have an opportunity when they have success to leverage that, whether it's right or wrong or fair, indifferent, however you feel about it. It leveled the playing field between the coaches and the players. And so it's going to make coaching a little bit more difficult, but at the same time, the players, there's so much player movement as a coach, you may have to change how you recruit, if you will. And the transfer portal may be your best friend. You may have your assistant coaches looking up and down that portal to make sure, or to see if you can find somebody that can fit your scheme of things. No longer do you have to wait on a high school guy.
Yep.
Because waiting to turn your program around. You may find that person or that player in the portal who's just disgruntled with his current situation and just wants to leave, and it's not all the time. Like Defo said, it's not going to be that 11th or 12th guy all the time. It may be one of your starters, as Jim Larrañaga is experiencing.
Yeah, well, and Larrañaga, thanks for the promo, is going to join us for what I think is his first interview since he left UM of any extensive period of time tomorrow, right here on Bleacher Brothers at 4:00 in the afternoon. So looking very much forward to that. All right, one final thing, Grant, and it really is, it's great seeing you. This is fantastic, a new technological development here on the program. And, okay, so where were you? I mean, I've mentioned this. I remember where I was when it was known that John F. Kennedy was shot. I was in a science class hoping to get out of a test. I was on my way back from the harness track when I found out John Lennon was assassinated and gunned down in New York, supposedly working at the newspaper that night, but I had taken a little detour down Catella Boulevard there in L.A. To Los Alamitos. Where were you? And I would imagine most people remember this when they found out about the Luka Doncic deal. Was it that monumental that you will never forget where you were and the stunned thoughts of disbelief that you had? And then a follow-up question to that what would be, does anybody in the league know where Nico Harrison is now? Is he in a non-extraditable country? I mean, where the hell is this guy?
Well, when you find him, he'll probably be next to Killian Hayes, first round pick. We're still looking for him. I think
Yeah.
for 10-day, but I don't know. But you know, here's the thing about that, Defo. It's a when you think about all of the things that go in, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Talking about the Doncic
Luka trade. Where were you on the Luka trade?
Don't know where I was.
Hmm.
I do know that I was completely shocked that Dallas would move him. And the first thing I thought is that you knew at that point that Mark Cuban was no longer running the team. He had a stake in it, but he was no longer influential in what the team was going to do. Because if that was the case, Luka Doncic would still be there. That was going to be he was, in essence, the follow-up to Dirk Nowitzki. And he was going to be one of those players just like Dirk, who played his entire career with the Dallas Mavericks in hopes of winning a championship, just as Dirk did. That was going to be the scenario as far as Mark Cuban was concerned. But new ownership, new people in place, felt like that just wasn't going to happen. And look how it turned out. You know, you got Kyrie Irving, who's sidelined now, Anthony Davis weak, and he got hurt. Luka Doncic is healthy, and the Lakers are in a great position right now to move into the postseason. I thought it was a good move for the Lakers because when you think about post LeBron, you're going to need somebody to sit up in the window and say, hey, you guys come play in LA. And Luka's that guy, you know, under 30 years old, who wouldn't want to come play with this kid. So you get a feature guy in LA, a big market team, and now you're going to get your opportunity to surround him with some quality players. Anthony Davis would have been like 35 or 36 years old by the time LeBron retires, if he retires in a couple of years. And that's just not the guy you want to start building around. So I think it was a good move for the Lakers. And I think they won in that deal, but still I was shocked at the same time. But all the undertones that I hear about the trade surround Lukic and his personal things that he have going on that kind of forced the trade of the Dallas Mavericks to get rid of him.
Yeah. Was he running some kind of Slovenian drug cartel or something? I mean, what the they sure soured on this guy. We couldn't have Oliver Millered himself out of Dallas. I don't know, just to eat himself out of the league. Grant, looking great. Congratulations. I'm glad you have something positive to talk about there in Detroit. We've been dying to get you on the show for a long time, ever since we've been following that story. We've been pumping it big time because I want Bickerstaff at 9-1 to be coach of the year. If you have a vote, trying to influence people while on the air here. This is very popular now. Just tell you, hey, go ahead and vote for my man. I'm sure you're solidly behind it. JB Bickerstaff, coach of the year with the Detroit Pistons. Grant, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much. Well, we'll have to do it again soon. I hope you can do it.
All right, guys. Have a wonderful day.
All right. Thanks so much. Grant Long, ladies and gentlemen. 15 years in the NBA. Ball would go into Cycli. Could we have called those games?
Probably.
Ball into Cycli. And it's disappeared. It's gone. There is no ball out there. This has to be an NBA unprecedented move. Unbelievable.
Just went away.
And was he like doing a Globetrotter thing where he put it under his jersey? Or in his shirt? Where the hell did the ball go for 23 and a half seconds, Ronnie? What were you doing? And I liked Ronnie Cycli, of course, being a Syracuse guy. All right, let's pop in quick messages here, or you want to just take it out the door?
Oh, I mean, we can if you want.
Yeah, we'll just take it out the door. That'll be we'll make it up to our many faithful sponsors here on the program. But we did want to get to Grant Long. All right, Lubie, any conclusive opinions of formulating that really was ugly. I hate to be disparaging about women's college basketball, because it seems like we're always dumping on them. Is it one of those things where, like, somebody recommends a restaurant to you and you go there and you think it's, so-so at best, and then they continue to rave about it, so you're thinking, well, geez, maybe I'll check it out again, and you go there and maybe they're having an off night or whatever. The chef called in sick at the last minute, but you find it less than overwhelming, kind of underwhelming, if you will, And that's kind of what's happening with me, checking out these major women's college basketball games. You see some highlights, and you're thinking, man, these girls, they've definitely upgraded the overall caliber of play. Would you agree with that, Lubie? Is that a fair statement?
Women's basketball is definitely better. It's just I still can't sit and watch it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hanging on the edge of my seat. every game. And I'm trying. I really tried to get into this game yesterday. It looked like the proverbial rugby scrum. It did. Rebounds bouncing on the floor before they're retrieved, air balls from 6 feet away, traveling violations to an excess that even Michael Jordan never even enjoyed. Juju Watkins is ice cold from the floor. She's like 0 for 11 in the second half after a big first half, which I missed, of course. So maybe I would have seen something sensational. And I thought about this, Louis. I mean, are you when you're losing mind bets? That's when you're 0-4 or whatever in mind bets, like you didn't even bet any money on this stuff, but you still would have lost everything. So I thought about throwing Colin Morikawa out there. I might have mentioned him as a possibility to win this Arnie Palmer thing. So I ended up just taking a blind stab, even though as you're saying something sometimes, you realize that has no chance of happening. Justin Thomas, who was in contention through a couple of rounds, and he must have just fallen into an abyss or something. Were there any sinkhole developments in Orlando? Because Thomas is in there with a 9-iron trying to climb out of one, middle of the fairway. But Morikawa had a shot to win this tournament. He's in command, seemingly so. He's up a couple of shots. And this guy, Henley, had been there knocking on the door the entire time, almost wire to wire. And they're in one of those positions where and this happens in sports, where one guy gets completely lucky and the other guy, unfortunately, after playing brilliantly, ends up falling short. So they're on 16. It's a par 5, relatively easily reachable. I mean, completely easily reachable in 2. So they're slaughtering this hole. Henley, who's trailing by a shot, is off the green about 50 feet away from the cup. It's one little chip shot. It flops just perfectly. How are these guys so good at these trouble shots? That's the amazing thing about the pros. They could be in any sort of trouble and somehow par a hole. This guy, in this case, he's off the green. He eagles the hole. And then with a relatively short, I would say 10 feet, birdie putt, Morikawa misses. 2-shot swing. Henley takes the lead. He holds him off to the wire and ends up winning his 5th tournament. So, and he hadn't won in a couple of years. So that was kind of a nice story. But if I gave out Morikawa, should I feel better that I just gave out a complete stiff? And how terrible is it that at this stage of my life, Lubie, I am rating my gambling and success or failure on mind bets that I've blown?
That's not good.
That was going to be a title of one of my working biographies for a while. Shut out on a mind bet when you don't even get the bet in time. They've already teed off, and you go, "Hey, give me Morikawa." Oh my God! You're shouting it at the screen. Don't get old, Louie. That's the name of the game. All right, great. Nice job with Grant Long. I didn't know he was going to do a video stream with us.
Yeah, we've had him on for years, even when we were doing video. It's early in the morning, and he's an hour behind, and then we did the clock thing, so I feel bad, but he was open to it, so I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Cool.
He was great, man. A lot of fun. All right, so that'll do it for today. I had a good time being with you. Many things I'm sure that we completely overlooked, but that's par for the course, is it not? Speaking of golf, Lubie?
There you go.
Watching a little Indian Wells, top seeds falling in the tennis tournament out there, but it's a prelude to the Miami Open, which is always a lot of fun. Do we have to plan? You're not as big a tennis fan. What would you?
I used to be.
Would you schlep there to watch this?
Yeah, for sure.
I like when I go to golf tournaments. I like watching guys on the driving range for some reason.
Yeah, it's fun.
Like 20 guys.
Yep.
They're hitting the ball, and you can imagine where it's going on the course. I mean, it doesn't always bounce exactly. It's not as wide open, clearly. I mean, it could hit a tree or whatever instead of just whoosh, 350 right down the middle. And then tennis, when they're warming up, they have the warm-up courts.
Yep.
Like when we saw, who was that? Sangha.
Yes, I was going to say, I think it was Sangha.
Yeah.
Just hit the crap out of it.
Frenchman, yeah.
The living daylights.
Beating the living daylights out of the ball. And then you're thinking, this guy's like Schmenk. He's like number 15 in the world.
100%.
And you can't even imagine what they're doing with this stuff. I mean, watching and that's one sport where I would say the women, although not equivalent to the men in terms of overall power, are more than demonstrating the kind of form that you would expect from a guy. Is that a sexist statement, Lubie? We were saying that about Diana Taurasi in the highest of praise.
I'm sure it would be taken. You don't mean it as
You
it.
can't
I don't
say
know.
anything. No, I mean it as a compliment. I really do.
I agree.
Yeah. If you're watching women's tennis, it comes as close to approximating the men's game.
Oh, as
as
any sport. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, if you take it from that, not meaning to devaluate what the women are doing on their own, they're great, Defo. You didn't have to make that stupid comment. Next thing you know, I'm being confronted by LeBron James. What do you know about that? Do people just like seeing Stephen A. Smith humbled?
Yes.
Or did they think that LeBron was being an over-the-top jerk since
I mean, most people, I presume.
almost everybody is, for the most part, I mean, he has his detractors, I'm sure. Skip Bayless has made a living doing that, making an idiot of himself. But I don't know. I think Stephen A. Smith, would you not say that half of his act is being prone to exaggeration?
Oh yeah, but I mean, look, on this one, it's hard to side with anyone but Stephen A. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't make dude, unless you go. And you still don't do it in public. Like, I'm sure they cross paths enough where there's not cameras. Like, LeBron knew what he was doing. He was doing it on purpose. He wanted to be videoed. He wanted people to see it. It's like, dude, he's not your 5-year-old son. Like, he's a professional.
Yeah.
And he's taking up a roster spot. Anytime he's been out there, he looks horrendous. Which is fine. He should have been in college another year. I don't know. If you want to propel your son forward, you should also be a dad and be like, look, man, maybe
You're not
ready
ready
in college. It goes both ways as a parent. You can't just be the one to push them, and then when things fall apart, go, oh, it's everyone else's fault. It's like, dude,
Well, when have you ever watched the NBA draft to the 53rd pick before?
No, never. And it's fine. And that's why I didn't make it a big deal around the draft when everyone was losing it, because it's like, who cares about the pick? But if someone is watching the team and criticizes Bronny, I don't know how as a parent you get mad at them. Like, what do you like? It's the job. That is what it is, man.
Comes with the turf.
Yeah. Don't put your kid into professional sports.
To this kind of criticism and commentary by playing. It wasn't like he made assertions about him that he was engaged in illegal activity or anything. He just said he wasn't an NBA player.
You don't think he's an idiot? He's a bad human being. He didn't say anything mean. From what I know, I haven't heard exactly what he said, but the fact that people are defending it, it tells me that he just criticized his game.
Where's Chris Rock stand on this? We don't know. All right, we have to get out of here. Thanks so much for being with us, sir. Thanks to Grant Long for joining us on the show. We'll join you again tomorrow, right here on Bleacher Brothers at 8 o'clock in the morning with the next edition of the Defo Show. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. As we leave you know that
The time.
It's 9:05.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.
Look what they